Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Starting off with our breaking news today, the first announcement on actual arrivals of M1 Abrams tanks has been made by the United States Department of Defense today, with an announced 31 M1 Abrams making their way to Ukraine by the beginning of early fall, according to the information that came out on Clash Report on Twitter just a few minutes ago. Apparently, this is the first time that the M1A1 Abrams tanks will actually be making their way to Ukraine, and many people have been following the saga and the story of the M1 Abrams tank and their original delivery date, which was supposed to be far earlier this year, and the multiple pitfalls and shortcomings that have been seen during the acquisitions program for these Abrams and the subsequent shipping of them into Ukraine. Of course, all of this has been greatly delayed from the original timetable that was stated, but nevertheless, these Abrams will finally be making their way to Ukraine at the beginning of autumn. The reason why we've been assuming that these tanks may have been delayed initially is that Abrams tanks have far better cold resistance measures built into them than other main battle tanks that have been delivered so far, such as the Leopard 2A6 main battle tank from the German army and the Challenger 2 from the British army. These Abrams may have arrived first to make sure that they were not attrited or lost during these months of the summer and leading to the fall, and so that way they could be used in the colder weather conditions that would be found in winter. The Abrams is a fairly exceptional tank as well. The M1A1 is not the most advanced variant of the M1 tank, but nevertheless it is a fairly advanced and modern tank. Only slightly better in some categories, and mostly the cold weather categories, compared to their counterparts, such as the Leopard 2 and the Challenger 2, but nevertheless, it will be making a major impact on the battlefields of Ukraine during the winter months, and hopefully these tanks will be integrated into some of those shock brigades and divisions that we've been seeing here on the southern front near Zaporizhia, and help them to continue to push the line back and make their way to Tokmak and Melitopol, which are the final objectives of this offensive. Speaking of objectives of the offensive that has so far been going on in the south, it does appear that we're continuously getting news and information showing that the Crimean Peninsula has been cut off for the large part due to the destruction of major bridgeways. The Kerch Bridge, of course, has been a topic of discussion ever since it was hit the second time just a short while ago. And of course, the Russians have been attempting to bring this bridge back into action, but it is now seen that this bridge will only be brought back up to full speed around the time of the end of this year or the beginning of 2024. And apparently another major traffic stoppage has occurred at the bridge again today, just around 20 minutes ago, according to Max 23. This information is fairly significant because it is giving proof to the claim that the Kerch Bridge's road segment has been knocked out for the large part for any kind of major transport efforts to bring supplies to the Russian forces inside of Crimea. And based off of that, we can also assume that the destroyed bridges up in the area of Hinichesk and Chanhar are also going to be proving that the supply situation inside of Crimea is only going to get worse as time goes by, and we'll eventually see that the Russian Navy and Air Force are completely neutered in their combat abilities due to a lack of ammunition or any kind of available firepower. Hell, even fuel could end up being a major issue, especially for the Russian Air Force that relies on imported jet fuel to the peninsula of Crimea that is not domestically made inside of the Crimean Peninsula, and therefore it must be imported. And the fact that we're seeing that these supply lines are being severely restricted in their abilities to bring in the overall quantity or bulk of supplies that they need, it indicates that the Russian Air Force, if any, will start to feel the effects of this supply cutoff first before even the Russian Navy does. Of course, the Russian Navy has also been a bit of a concern recently as well, speaking of the Crimean Peninsula and the effects that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has had on the supply situation there, as the Russians have continuously stated, although we've seen that it hasn't been too effective, that they're going to continue an attempt to blockade Ukrainian ports, such as the ports of Chornomorsk, Odessa, and Mykolaiv, in an attempt to try and end any kind of cargo shipping reaching its way to Ukraine. This blockade has been met with a lot of criticism worldwide due to the fact that it's cutting off the Grain for Ukraine deal that provided precious grains and food sources to many countries around the world that are not so secure in their in food security is the best way to put it. Not to try and say security as many times as possible, but nevertheless, this has been something that has been met with ire, and it appears that President Zelensky has started to make a vow today that the Russian Navy will eventually cease to exist at some point. According to a quote that Nexta was able to receive from President Zelensky, Zelensky stated today that if Russia continues to dominate the Black Sea and blockade it by firing missiles, Ukraine will do the same, which is a fair defense of our capabilities. If they keep firing, we don't have that many weapons. But if they keep firing, they could be without ships by the end of the war. And that's what we want to show them. And of course, this was said in an interview to a media source. This is something fairly interesting to note, and something that has actually been followed through on. We have seen a Rapucha-class ship near the city of Novorossiysk critically damaged and nearly sunk by a Ukrainian kamikaze drone boat attack, and this is showing that the Ukrainians may not have a navy, but they certainly do have the ability to inflict massive damage onto the Russian Navy. The Russian Navy, specifically the Black Sea Fleet, has been suffering serious losses throughout the war without actually engaging a Ukrainian surface fleet or even Ukrainian submarines. All of their losses have been inflicted by anti-ship missiles and drone warfare, which has been incredibly cost-efficient for the Ukrainians, but has been seriously crippling the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the most important one for the Russian Federation, since the very beginning of the war. And the fact that Zelensky is making this statement, and once again reassuring that the Russian Navy will continue to be attacked and seriously damaged in its abilities throughout the entirety of the war, may put more diplomatic pressure on the Russians to try and reinstate the Ukrainian grain deal, to try and save face, or to potentially try and save their navy from more vicious attacks from Ukrainian forces. But that's not all. We also saw that in the Donetsk region today, a missile strike was conducted by the Russians, most likely in retaliation for the Ukrainian successful hit on the Rapucha-class landing ship near Novorossiysk, that has caused some very serious civilian casualties. This is a small video clip of the apartment block that was hit inside the city of Pokrovsk. We can already see the Ukrainian firefighters and first responders have made it to the scene, but as of the making of this video, 5 Ukrainians have been killed, and an additional 17 have been wounded due to this attack in the city of Pokrovsk. We can already see the firefighters tending to some of the wounded that have made it outside the building, but of course this is another direct attack by the Russians as a reprisal for the war onto the Ukrainian citizenry, and that is of course a war crime by any measure. We're going to be moving on from the city of Donetsk, because while the Russians certainly treat their enemies brutally, and their people even more so, it appears that even their friends are starting to pick up on the brutality of the Russians and beginning to betray their friendship with them for short-term gains. And the country that we're talking about is probably going to be shocking to all of y'all. It is North Korea. And in between the short amount of time that the North Koreans have rekindled their friendship with the Russians and have begun to transport arms and mortar rounds to the Russian Federation, they have already begun to betray their trust. North Korean forces, internet forces, have been able to hack into a Russian corporation that produces cruise missiles, and right now at this moment, the amount of information that the North Koreans have been able to gain from this hacking is currently unknown. This picture that y'all are seeing right here actually didn't come from that long ago either, and makes this even more hilarious when you really think about it. Kim Jong-un and Shoigu just met a little over a few weeks ago, around 2 to 3 weeks ago. And this meeting, according to both sides, furthered the friendship and understanding in between North Korea and Russia. And what did the North Koreans do after they got this trust? They immediately went and betrayed it and hacked into a vital Russian corporation's computer systems and are attempting to steal cruise missile information, so that way the North Koreans can hopefully reverse engineer those missiles and create their own. And if that isn't shocking, I don't know what is. And I think that's probably one of the craziest things we've heard, is that one of Russia's few friends, and the only friends that they have in the world, true friends, are Belarus, North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela, and also Guatemala as well. I forgot to mention Guatemala. They have already lost one of them. The North Koreans are already betraying them and using the Russians for their own gain. Of course, the Russians should have seen that coming. That's why no one has really been great friends with the North Koreans, is because they immediately begin to stab people in the back as soon as you become friends with them. And they also stab you in the back even when you're not a friend with them. Hell, they're just really into the habit of doing that kind of thing. But nevertheless, it is hilarious to see that the Russians can't even count on their quote-unquote true allies to help them out in their time of need. Instead, they take advantage of them and try and steal their secret technologies so that way they can use them for themselves. But nevertheless, that is all of the major news of today. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and if you all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we run videos like these pretty much every single day of the week, almost 7 days a week, covering the major news points of the war. And we also run nightly live streams as well, 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can always count on us to be there. Of course, unless if law school gets in the way, then that might start to pose an issue. But nevertheless, you can largely count on us to be here. And I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.